Any questions?
So in the Parashat Shlach story, are we exonerating the Tanim of what they said because we're saying they were like set up for a disaster?
No, so we never said that. We couldn't say that because they're punished and they get killed. They would, in other words, they still are the true villains of the story. And we need to understand that because they violated the clear parameters of their mission to report back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? When they came back and said that, that was a violation of their... Now, unfortunately, their corrupt plot was made easier by the way they were sent. But it was still their corruption and their violation of the trust put into them by Moshe and by God that was the ultimate sin. And that is true in both stories. In Bemidbar and Devarim, right? They have melted our hearts. So that is definitely unquestionable. The guilt and the culpability of the Meragelim and the Tarim, because at the end now I can call them Meragelim and Tarim, because they were both, right? Their guilt and culpability is unquestioned.
By Yehoshua's Meragelim, the claim that their mission was simply to figure out the state of affairs, wouldn't that be a lot similar to Todd, and it should be reporting to the nation?
No, because it's still a military, right? So it's not, it's still a military sense. In other words, they need to say, and they need to report upon the potential success of a battle. In other words, they still need to figure out, will we succeed or not in this battle? Now, they don't have to report, according to the Ralbag, about the entire normative, military expedition the way spies will do. It's a limited mission because Yehoshua knows he's going in. Yeshua's already planned to go in. What he really needs to do is strengthen the heart of his soldiers by telling them the state of mind of the people. And it's very possible that Yehoshua himself may have already guessed at the answer already. But he wanted witnesses to testify to that fact.
So where do we see that Yehoshua shares the message from the Meragelim with the nation?
So, right, we don't see in Mifurash him do it, but the reason we would assume that that would be the mission, and we would assume that maybe he did it, was, at least according to the Bag, because that's the only piece of information he gets back. And he doesn't say, oh, you really messed up, boy. Right? So he gets that, and because take a look at the words of the Meragelim. We will succeed because they are afraid. If they didn't accomplish their mission, they say, look, Yehoshua, we're sorry. We got caught right away. We apologize. But guess what? We found that one key piece. They're scared. That we would assume. But that's not what they say. They say, we're going to win. And guess what? They're afraid. So it sounds like a full report that Yehoshua was waiting for. You're right. There is some point that we would expect now to Yehoshua say, to tell the people, that it seems to be missing within the Pshat. I'd like to have that have been there, but it's not.
Not a question, but just I guess something to add that supports the Rabbi's point, which is that the Mefashim all point out the timeline of the sending of the Meragelim. Like Malbim points out, that really Perek Bet happened before Perek Aleph. Because the whole time you were talking, I was thinking the question in my mind, why is God's speech to Yehoshua in Perek Aleph not enough to do what the Meragelim did? Mm-hmm. How does that play in? But according to the timeline, this really, like the Malbim points out, Perek Bet really happened before Perek Aleph. Which means that Yehoshua was looking for that Hazak Hizuk prior to God.
Right. In other words,
he didn't get that.
Right. That would even strengthen even more.
Strengthens the point that that's what his mission was.
That the Malbim said. I didn't see that Malbim.
should we go in? He's telling them, both Moses and Joshua, saying, we are going in. We are
Right.
going in regardless. But tell us the situation of the land.
Right.
And they come back and say, well, Moses, no, we shouldn't go in.
Right.
So
That's Moshe's. Right. Moshe's spies have overstepped there.
But maybe their direction wasn't very clear.
So it's hard to say that because their questions are pointed, and Moshe gives them many points. I mean, if you take a look, it's almost tiresomely long, their list of questions. It's very specific and very pointed in Shelah, right? Many points. It's hard not to understand what you're supposed to do when you have so many specific, pinpointed goals to accomplish.
Time is in between when it's and the people would want to go back to Egypt, and then until he's
Between when they left and the Hayta Meragelim, about a year.
So why do we assume that Hashem himself saw that they weren't ready to go in, and they would rather go back to Egypt and fight? That it's Moshe's, that's his sin, or maybe he just couldn't.
So Abarbanel it's the Abarbanel who says that this was where he's punished for. And the Abarbanel that's what the Abarbanel says. And the Abarbanel would say that that Moshe here, in his leadership, missed something. In other words, it wasn't, and it's hard to call it a sin, so to speak. In other words, what Moshe, according to Abarbanel, he's being punished for this because of some leadership lacking at that one moment. It actually, it makes, I think, Moshe does not go into Israel because he sinned, right? It's actually not really sinning here. It's just there's some form of tactical error at this point that Moshe made, which enabled this to happen.
Well, when God came to him on the mountain, what was the mission? To go take them out of slavery, right?
Yeah.
Now, if this would have continued, it might have been a bonus. But maybe that wasn't the plan for him.
That's hard to know. Right. It's hard to know.
Tangent, but you remember things every day, and it says that how the Jews made Hashem angry, and especially the Heta Egel. So how come we don't could we say Heta Meragelim? Heta Egel. Why do we remember Heta Egel more than Heta Meragelim?
Right. I think, in other words. I don't know, because Heta Meragelim seems to have the much more drastic effects. If Heta Egel is something we commemorate on Shivasar B'Tammuz, it's Heta Meragelim, is because the Ishtabiru Aluchot, it's Heta Meragelim that we commemorate on the ultimate day of sorrow, which is Tisha B'Av. So I think Heta Meragelim should be part of our national mourning and national psyche as a time where we really messed up. And I think the consequences were even graver than that of Heta Egel.
If these Tarim were commanded to be Meragel, why were they punished for adding on their opinions about everything?
Again, L'Ragel, again, it is true that by sending the Tarim as Meraglim, that enabled them to violate their initial mission. That doesn't mean they're supposed to do that. If you have true concerns as a Meragel, those are reported to Moshe, not to the entire nation. Right? But you violated, as the Abarbanel said, you used, and this is what we wanted Moshe to see, potentially that could have happened. Moshe trusted them. Moshe said, of course they're going to do what they're supposed to do. These are 12 great men. But that trust that he put in them enabled them to violate it. So what they did is, as Tarim, they had a certain response to report to the nation. As Miraglim, you have concerns, go to Moshe. But you were divine, you were on a divine mission, leaders of the people, as Abarbanel said, selected by Moshe publicly. So you used your clout not to report Miraglim concerns, but to advance your conclusions as a Miragel and to advance your agenda. You use the trust Moshe put in you to advance an opposite agenda than that of Moshe Rabbeinu. There is no greater sin than we can imagine than that violation of God's trust, Moshe's trust, the people's trust, and using your clout and using Moshe's trust that he put in you to also accomplish a Meragel mission, to publicize your agenda. There's nothing worse. And that's why they are called the evil Edah. They are evil people. They have violated that trust. So I want to make that clear because I think you were the second or third person that asked that question. I want to make it clear. This doesn't whitewash the Meraglim. If anything, it makes their sin even much greater than we thought beforehand. We've understood how bad was what they've done. Right? This is not just an honest, objective report that we don't like the answer to. Right? This is something that is clearly a purported violation of the ultimate trust that is put in them. So I think that, like I said, it's not something that we can excuse them for. It's an inexcusable violation of what they were supposed to do. Yeah.
Once Moshe started hearing that they started to be Meragel about us, why did he stop them?
So that's another question, which we're not going to deal with. Which, when we talk about Perashat Shlach, why it was Kalev that had to stop them? Why was Yehoshua that has to stop them? Why couldn't it be Moshe? Clearly, it was Kalev and Yehoshua that had to be the ones to stop them because they were the ones that were there. Right? Moshe was not there. Moshe does what he can in terms of initiating and showing his displeasure by falling on his face, which, as I said many times before, is not, as some people think or say, an act of inaction. We see Moshe doing it elsewhere when he does take action. That's an active show of displeasure and almost of showing of his disagreement with what they say. But he cannot be the one to openly challenge as he wasn't there. He needs Yehoshua and Kalev to do that because they were there. But it is not, as some people try to say, inactivity on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's also one of the things that's different because in Devarim it seems like Moshe did speak. It's just not recorded in Parashat Shelach.
Right, so that's the question of, we certainly did not get into, and I do not plan to get into, all of the contradictions between Shelach and Devarim. There are many. I think we can count at least 20, if not more. I only brought the ones that were relevant to the point vis-a-vis Yehoshua. There are many, many contradictions, and how we analyze them and how we answer them, that's for another time on more when we talk not about Nevi'im, but about Perashah. Yes?
Don't even the Mefashim talk about the difference in number, like that Yehoshua only said 2 and Moshe?
Right, so we would assume that that is definitely an important point to point out, and that would be part and parcel of a mission that is certainly just Leragel. We would send a small, spies don't go in this large entourage, but a small, group of people incognito, right? So that would be. What's interesting is the Midrash points out who were these two people, right? They were Pinchas and Kalev. So in other words, it happens to be Kalev who is the one who got his mission right in the first time. So that's an interesting Midrash which we can talk about another time. Okay, so.